Hi guys, welcome to part 27 of the roguelike tutorial series. One of the most satisfying parts of Vampire Survivors is rolling for new items on the treasure chest. So we are going to cover how to do that in this video. Let's first create the TreasureChest UI. Let's create a UI canvas in the hierarchy and rename this to TreasureChest Manager. Then we're gonna go to the inspector and change the render mode to screen space camera. And this is because our TreasureChest UI will be using particle effects for effects that will be playing during the opening sequence of the treasure chest. Then we're gonna want to set the render camera to our main camera, change the sorting layer to foreground and order in layer 100. This is just to ensure that the UI that we are displaying will always be the top of this game scene. Then in the canvas scaler, make sure that it scale with screen size. Then we want to change this to 1920 by 1080. And after that, we're gonna create the background for our treasure chest. So go to our treasure chest object again, and then we want to create a UI image, and we'll name this the chest panel. After that, we just want to set its width. And now we have a background for our treasure chest. Next, we're gonna want to have a nice border for our treasure chest background. So we can create another UI image underneath the chest panel, and let's call this the chest border. And we want to have it to be the exact same size as our chest panel. So set the width and height to be the exact same. Then we want to, in the inspector, in the image, let's set it to a border that we want. Then we notice that the border is a little bit too big, so we can always make it smaller by changing the pixel per unit here. Set it to 2. And after that, we want to split its anchor so that it is exactly the same size as our panel over here. We won't be splitting the anchor for our chest panel, and that's because when the screen size is changing, we do not want our chest panel to be deformed in a way. This is because a lot of the effects will be broken if the chest panel would be deformed. Now we're gonna make the treasure chest that will be in the middle of this UI. So in the project folder, you can see that there's already a treasure chest over here, and you want to split it up in a way so that there will be 2 halves of the treasure chest. So we have the top half, the cover only, and then the bottom half with the front part and the rear part of the chest. So to add this to our UI, we're gonna go to the chest panel, and we're gonna create the UI image, and let's name this chest front. And then in the inspector, the images, we're gonna assign the front part of the chest to it, and we'll basically do the same for the rest of the chest. And as you can see, now that we have a treasure chest in our UI, and if we were to disable this, it will show that the treasure chest is open, and then this will be closed, and that's why it's split up this way. Next, let's create the button for the treasure chest. Go to the treasure chest panel. We're going to create a UI button, text mesh pro. Then let's name this the open button. This will be the button that will be appearing at the very start of the UI when it opens up, and then you will click it to open up the chest to start the animation sequence. So we're gonna want to go to the text and change the text to open, and then we want to set the color. Then we want to change the button's background color too. Then after that is done, let's just set its position and width and height. Now we want to add a border for our button, so let's create another UI image. And we want to match the same width and height as our button, so let's just, then after that just assign the same border we have assigned for our background. And you can see that it is a little too thick, so we will make this thinner by changing the pixels per unit. Set it to 3. Then after that, let's rename this to the button border. Then we want to set its anchor so that it is around the same size as this button. So we split it to all 4 corners of the button. After that is done, we're gonna want to create another button. So we will duplicate the open button, and then let's rename this to the done button. And this button will be what will be popping up after the animation sequence of the treasure chest, and the player will click it to close the UI. So remember to change the text to done. So now we need a coin display. So the coin display will be underneath the button, and it will be displaying the amount of coins the chest has given the player. So in the chest manager, let's create a UI text mesh pro. Let's call this the coin display text. Then after that, let's go to the inspector and change its alignment to the center on both. Then after that, let's just set this to 0, and you may change the coin color to whatever you like. Then we'll set its position to be underneath the done button. Okay, after that is done, remember to check off auto sizing. Okay, so that now that after that is done, remember to set the done button to inactive too. You want to make sure that the open button is always the one that is active, and the done button will be set active later on with a logic. So now that we have the coin display and the treasure chest and the button, we will need the beams that will be showing up when the chest is being opened. So let's go to the treasure chest manager and create an empty game object, and this object will be the parent for all the beams that will be in the treasure chest. So we're gonna call this the beam mask, and then in the inspector, let's add a mask component called rect mask 2D. So we're gonna want to resize this mask 2D. This is just to ensure that our beams do not go out of bounds of the border. As you can see in Vampire Survivors, the beam gets cut off at the very top, and then it gets cut off at the part where it comes out from the chest. So now we're gonna create another empty game object. This will be the parent that will be holding all the other beams. So I just call this the beam parent. And then we're gonna want to create a UI image, and let's just call this beam number 1. Then we can size it to however we like. Now as you can see, the beam cannot go beyond the border due to our mask. And if I were to turn on Gizmo, you can see that it looks like it's coming out of the treasure chest. Then after we have that, let's just change its color and set its transparency to 70. And let's just set our coin text to be inactive. After you have finished making all of that, we're gonna make a particle effect for when the chest is being opened. There is a weapon scrolling animation that goes on. So in order to make that, let's go to our beam and create another child and call it the weapon beam. Then after that, let's go to the inspector and add particle system. Then there's a few things we're gonna need to configure. So we're gonna start with going to the renderer and change it to order layer foreground. And after that, let's just add a material, like just add a default particle. Okay, so that it shows up in the game scene. Next, let's change the properties. So we're gonna want this to last for 8 seconds. Let's have make sure this is looping. And the lifetime, let's make it 0.5. Start speed 15. And then the emission, let's just make it 12. And the shape, as you can see, right now is in a cone. So what we want is to have the particles to be moving upwards. So let's just change the shape to edge. You can see it's starting to move upwards now, but it is too spread out. So to make it less spread out, we're gonna change the radius. Let's just set it to 0. So now you can see it's more of a straight line now. You can start to see how the scrolling will start working. What we're gonna need to do now is just to replace the sprites here with the actual weapons. So in order to do that, we're gonna need to go to TreasureChest animation and then go to sprites, and we're gonna add a bunch of sprites, and we'll randomly assign the sprites to it. Now you'll notice a little problem where it's a little bit jittery, and in order to fix this, we're gonna have to go to the bottom here and change the time mode to FPS, and then make sure the FPS is 0. Then we're gonna change this to random between 2 constants, and then we add 10. And after that, your weapon scrolling is done. There's a few things you can do, like for example, your start lifetime. You can adjust the length of it by adjusting the lifetime or the speed. Now that the weapon beam is done, let's create an item display for when the animation ends and it displays your rewards. So we're gonna create in the beam number 1 here. Let's create an empty game object, and then we're gonna rename this to just item, or I can name it item parents. So this will be the item that will contain all of the other effects and UI. So we are able to enable and disable all of those effects at once. So under the item parent, let's create a UI image, and let's call this the item backdrop. So this will be the background for the items. So we're gonna, in the image, just add a backdrop, which we already have prepared in our project folders. And then after that, let's just change its position and size. After that, let's create a UI image, and this will be the items. So let's just call this the item sprite. So this is where the item will be displayed. So as you can see, if I were to put an item like this, you can see that it's how it's going to be displayed. You are able to leave this blank for now, as the items will be inserted in by code in the logic later on. Let's create a VFX for this item, where you can see in Vampire Survivors, when the rewards are being shown, there's a glowing effect, and then there's a ring that closes in at the very start of the review, and then a glowing effect afterwards that lingers. So we're going to be making those 2 effects right now. There are a few things you need to prepare ahead of time to create the ring effect and the glowing effect. The things I'm gonna need is the sprites here. So we're gonna have to create in Photoshop or any other drawing app. And I want to make a ring, and then we want to make the same for the item glowing here. So just make an X, and that will do. Now in the parent, let's create an empty game object and call this the ring VFX. Then we're gonna add a particle system to it. Let's change the duration to 1, and then turn off the looping, because we want the ring to only appear once, and we don't want it to keep happening over and over again. Let's actually head to the renderer. Let's change this to a normal material, just so we can see it for now. And then make sure to change this to foreground, and now that we can see in the game scene, we're gonna go into here, ensure the start speed is 0, and then we're gonna have to change this to unscale time again, like normal. Then after that, emission, let's set this to 0. And instead of rate over time, we're gonna use burst. So in the burst, let's leave it to 0, and then have the count to be 1. So one singular particle will be burst out. And then we're gonna leave everything else the same. And after that, the shape, let's just make sure this is edge and then 0, just for no spread. Actually, let's change the start size to something a little bigger so you can see it. Like that. Okay, now we're gonna need it to shrink over time. So we're gonna need to do a size over lifetime. And then we're gonna need to change the graph. So let's configure the graph. And set it to something like this. So we want it to be big at the start and then it gets smaller over time. Let's configure the graph a little bit so that it's a little bit slower at the start. Let's check it out. And yep, you can see that it's shrinking. So you may configure this to your liking and let you play around with this graph. Right, the next we're gonna want to add. We're gonna add a material, which is the ring. Atom ring. See? It's a little bit too slow. Let's start speed. Let's make it 15. As you see, it's a little too slow, so let's drag this a little bit closer. Maybe just make it faster. Okay. Okay, now that we have the ring VFX done, let's create the glowing effect. So we're gonna create the same thing, create a anti-game object, and let's make this the glow VFX. Then add a sprite particle, then add a particle system. Alright, we're gonna start with the renderer. Let's go in and add in our item glow effect. Then we're gonna make sure this is in foreground. And now that everything is in display, let's start making our VFX. So we're gonna start over here. We're gonna make sure this will remain the same. Make sure they are always looping. Then let's make the lifetime 2. Start speed 1. Effects. Then let's start with the renderer. We're gonna add the glow to our material here. Then let's change this to something layer foreground. Now that we have that, we're gonna want to change the main part to duration of 1 second. Then after that, we want looping to be true, lifetime to be 1, and then start speed to be 0. And then let's make the size slightly bigger. Make it 2. Okay, now that we have that, let's make sure this is in unscaled time. Then in emission, we want this to be not rate over time but a burst. So let's create another one and make it a 1 burst. And as you can see how it's being in a random location, being spawned in a random location. To change that, we go to shape, edge, and then we change the radius to 0. Now it's more consistent. Now there's 2 things we're gonna need for this shine VFX or the glowing VFX is to make it shrink down and then shrink back up again, and then to make it rotate. So we're gonna start with rotating over lifetime. And you can see if we enable this, we're gonna start rotating. Let's make it 90 so it rotates a little bit more. Then after that, let's have size over lifetime. And then we're gonna make a custom graph here. And you'll start from the biggest, both of them. And then we're gonna have it dip down, so let's straighten them first. Then add a key, and then let's make it dip down to around 50. And you can see now it's now pulsing. It's a pulsing effect. Okay, now that that is done, we're gonna want to create multiple. As you can see in Vampire Survivors, there are multiple glow effects layered on each other. So in order to do that, we're gonna duplicate this 2 times. But you can see how they are all being animated together at the same time. So in order to make it be slightly different from another, let's add some delay. Add a 0.4 seconds delay to each of them. But increment them by 0.4 every time. So as you can see, now the shine is more separated and looks better. So now that all the VFX for the beam is done, we're gonna duplicate the beams like 4 times, and let's rename all of them. Now we have positioned all the beams to be in the position of all the 5 beams that are present in Vampire Survivors. Now that all of this is done, let's go into each beam, and then we're going to disable the item parent of each. Then we're going to go to the beams, those are the parents. Then we'll disable all the beams, and then they're done. Let's also put our chest cover back. And now we're ready to move on to the additional VFX that will be happening when the chest is opening. Before we start creating our VFX, we're gonna need to first create an empty game object, and let's call this the TreasureChest VFX. Then after that, under all of this will be where we would create all our VFX from now on. So we're gonna create an empty game object, and let's call this the glowing VFX. Then let's add a particle system. To start, let's add 1.5 to the duration, make sure it's not looping. Then lifetime to be 7, speed to be 0, and then we want the start size to be somewhere bigger, so it's a 3D start size. Then 40, 100. Then we want the start rotation to be 90. Then we have to make sure that it's in unscaled time. Let's go to the renderer and change this to additive beam. Then foreground, and make this 100, just so that it will be behind the UI over here. So let's check out our... Okay, that looks good. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, now let's go to color over lifetime. Then we'll change this to alpha 0. Let's maybe add one more here so it doesn't get transparent too fast. Somewhere around here. Okay. Let's check out our effect. It looks good. Alright, next let's go to the TreasureChest VFX again. Create a new VFX. Let's call this the Shining VFX. Then let's add a particle system to it. So keep the duration, and then looping to be true. And then let's have post start delay, and then we're gonna have a start lifetime of 1. Then start speed, let's make it a random between 2 constants, and make it 20 and 40. Then let's have start size, so random between 2 curves also. make it 2 and 5. Then after that, let's have start rotation. Let's make it also render between two curves. And let's make it 0 and 180. And let's make the start color yellow. Then let's go to our renderer and let's change the foreground to 100. And let's add a material. Let's add the additive particle system to it. Okay. Now that you have that, let's make it start going upwards. So in emission, let's change this to 20. And then in the shape, we want it to start going up, so let's change this to edge. And then let's increase the radius to somewhere around 20. That looks good. Move this down a little bit so it starts from the bottom. Okay, now that we have this, let's go to our color over lifetime, and we want this to turn transparent after a while, so let's make this part here transparent. So over time it will become transparent. Then after that, let's have rotation over lifetime. Then let's change this to random between two curves to negative 360 and then 360. Next, let's go to our texture sheet animation and change this to sprites. And let's add some sprites from the assets. We'll be using the Canny Particle sprite sheet for this. Let's look for some particles that would be nice to use. After you have gotten the particles, let's change this to FPS and change 0. Render between 2, and then let's change it to 5. Now let's make the coins that will be spewing out the treasure chest. Let's create a new empty game object and let's call this the gold coins VFX. And let's add a particle system to it. So for the duration, let's just keep this 2. And then when I increase the modifier, the gravity modifier to 1, and then change the simulation space to world. Make sure this is in unscaled time. Then after that, let's go to the renderer. Let's make sure to let's change this to a line, default line. Then the foreground, just make sure that it's always on top. Okay, now that you have this, let's go to velocity over lifetime. Then let's change this to 2.5. And then the world, radio to be 5. You can see now it's starting to spew out like that. Let's have the speed modifier to 2.5. And change start speed to 1. And then let's have our emission to be 25. Let's go to shape. Keep it the cone. Our angle to be 45. And after that, let's have a radius of 0. Okay, then change the arc to 180. Now that you can see that it looks like it's spewing out the chest, let's go and add a texture sheet animation. And let's change this to sprites. Then to add our sprites, let's add a coin sprite. Then we can change the color a little bit so it looks like a gold coin. Okay, so now let's make the core coins to be more 3D. So we go to rotation over lifetime. Then let's change this to separate axis. And let's do 180 on all 3 axes. Then let's just add additional VFX. Let's make a silver version. So we'll just call this the silver coin VFX. Then after that, we simply just change the color from gold to silver. And now you have your coins VFX. For the final VFX, it'll be a victory beam. So head to our treasure chest and let's create an empty game object. Let's call this the victory beam. And then VFX. Then let's give it the particle system. So let's go to renderer and set its material to additive particles. And then have it to be in the foreground. set it so that it's in front of everything. Then after that, we will keep duration and make sure it's looping. Lifetime we will set to 0.1 and speed to 0. And size, you can keep it for now. And then let's make the color yellow. Then let's set gravity modifier to 1 and simulation space to world. And this basically makes it so that the particle system is now a trail. You can see. It would be more obvious if I were to set emission to 1000. You can see that it looks like a trail now. Then always remember to set it to unscaled. Delta time must be unscaled. And then we're going to set the shape to make sure it's cone. And then we want it to be more dense. So we're going to set radius to 0. So now it's more dense. And now we have the beam. Then the only thing left is we're going to duplicate it. You can rename this to Victory Beam 2. Then let's create an empty game object. Let's call this the Victory Beam parent. Then we'll parent the 2 underneath it. Then the parent. Let's create an animation for the parent. Let's call this the Victory Beam VFX. Okay, after that, let's position our Victory beams so that they are at the same position. Alright, let's get to animating the both of them. So we're gonna start recording the animation, so it starts saving. Then we'll move the VFX to the position we want them to. Start with this. Then we'll basically animate both of them at the same time. What they'll do is they'll be mirroring each other and moving in an S and then going back to their starting location. Once that's done, you can just click play and check out what the animation looks like. Looks good. Maybe I'll just make it last a bit longer. 1 second. And there we have it. That's all the VFX done for the treasure chest. Then the only thing left to do is for the beam mask to have the delete beam effect. So when you look at the 5-star weapon chest, you'll notice that there are curved beams, like curved weapon beams coming out of the treasure chest. So we're going to be making that duplicate the weapon beam here, and let's add it to our beam parents. And then we're going to duplicate our weapon beam, a victory beam, and let's add it here. And we're going to parent the weapon beam to the victory beam, and then we will duplicate these two together. And then let's rename this to curved weapon beam. Let's rename this to the same, curved weapon beam 2. So now you have 2 of them. Let's create another parent for it. So create empty game object. Let's just call it curved beams, or you call it delete beams. And then add the 2 of them inside. So there's some adjustment we're gonna need. Actually, let's just delete this one first. There's some adjustment we're gonna need to do to some of them. So the weapon beam, here, we're gonna get rid of the scrolling effect. So we're gonna start with the start speed. Let's remove it, and it's 0. Then we're gonna want this to turn into a trail. So we'll do the same thing we did for the victory beam. Go to gravity modifier, change to 1, simulation space to world, and then now it should turn into a trail. Alright, now that is done, actually we could set modifier to 0. it should still work. Yep, it still works. Okay, so now the curve beam, we're gonna change this to curve beam. We're gonna change this to material to sprite, something like this. Then we're gonna want to align the two. So let's just set the position to 0. Okay, so now as you can see, when I move this, they move along. Then we want the beam to be a little bit longer, so let's change the curve beam lifetime to 2. Then we're gonna set its gravity modifier to 0. Now we have a nice beam effect. Good. So now that we have the victory beam here, let's duplicate another one. So we have 2. Then we'll do the same. We'll create curved beam animation and animate it. So curved beam, save it, and then now we just animate it like it is in the Vampire Survivor. Okay, now that you have the animation, let's go to the project folder, delete beams. Let's just turn looping off, curve to beams. So the curve beams and turn the loop time off. Then after that, let's look at our animation and see if it's okay. It could be slightly faster, so go to our animation, then you can just adjust it. Also edit at the end where they will disable themselves. So let's go here and then you can do this so that at the end it will disable. Here just enable. You can do this. Okay. Then just make it slightly faster, 2 seconds. Should be good. Something like that. So hit disable at 3 seconds. Let's see what. Okay. Yep, that looks good. Then we just need to make it a little bit faster, 1 second long. Just a bit. Okay, looks good. Okay, and that's it for the UI of the treasure chest. Yeah, we will also need the Fireworks VFX. So let's go to our treasure chest and create empty game objects, and let's call this Fireworks. So fireworks only appear when you open a 5-item treasure chest. So it appears at the very start, and as you can see there are 5 fireworks. So we already have the Fireworks VFX prepared over here. So I'll just add this to the parent. So as you can see, I already have the Fireworks VFX prepared. The VFX is made from this video. You can go and check it out and make the fireworks from there. And after you are done with that VFX, let's copy and paste it another 4 more times. Then we'll just arrange it to where we want. So we have different places we want this to explode. And we do not want all of them to explode at the same time, so let's just increase its delay by maybe 0.1 second. Okay, that is done. Let's move on to writing the logic for our treasure chest. Let's start by looking at the 3 possible rewards you can receive from the treasure chest. Notice how there are noticeable difference between all 3 animations. We will need to make a scriptable object to make it easy to configure these rewards. Scriptable object allow us to define all variables for each treasure chest in one place. Let's take another look at the animations and figure out what settings we will need. First, we will need a variable to define how many items the chest should give. Next, we will want a setting for the color of the beams. Notice how the animation length varies between chest types, so we will add a duration variable as well. We will create a new script called TreasureChestDropProfile. This script will serve as our scriptable object where we will store each type of treasure chest. Add in this line so that we will be able to create a scriptable object in the project file later on. The first thing we will need will be to be able to define how many items will be dropped and the color of the beams. We will also need settings for the coins. In Vampire Survivors, the amount of coins awarded from the chest is chosen randomly within a certain range. To support this, we are going to add a variable for min coin and max coin to define the maximum and minimum number of coins the chest can award. Next, let's add a variable to define the name of each treasure chest. We will also include luck scaling and base chance to control the drop rate of this profile. And we will add a duration variable to define how long the chest animation should be. Also, an audio clip for the sound effect of the chest opening. Since the 5-item treasure chests have additional animations like fireworks, curved beams, and delayed beams, let's add some variables so that we can configure them too. We will add a variable to turn on and off fireworks and set its delay. We will have a variable to define how long the beam will be delayed and how many beams will be delayed. Finally, we will have a variable to turn on and off the curved beams and the beam will be spawned. Now that the drop profile is done, head back to the editor and create the drop profile scriptable object in the folder. Rename it to 1item and we will start configuring the settings for the 1item reward. Now, let's write a script for the Treasure Chest Manager. Start by creating a script and call it the UI Treasure Chest. Let's start by defining some important variables, since all treasure chests use the same UI to show rewards. Instead of each chest hunting for its own manager, we'll create one static variable and call it instance, which will allow other scripts to be able to easily access or reference it. Then, we will need a variable for the treasure chest and the treasure chest drop profile. Let's add a variable for the VFX we want to enable. Let's add a section for UI elements we want to disable. Next, let's add a UI component we want to alter. Afterwards, we will need a few private variables for keeping track of items and animation. Then we will need audio source and audio clip variables to play the opening sound effects. Finally, we will create a shrug for the item displays. Now that the variables are done, we can start with the awake function. Here, we will get the component of the audio source. Then, we would like to ensure that the UI is set inactive. Since we are making the script into a singleton, we must ensure that only one instance of it exists in the scene. We can do that by checking our instance variable. If the instance variable is already set and it is not this object, it will destroy itself. If not, it will then set itself as the instance. After that, we will create a static function called activate, so the treasure chests are able to easily call this function and provide the script with necessary info. The info we will need to extract from the chest will be player collector that picked up the chest, what the current chest is, finally the drop profile of the treasure chest. We will then change the state of the game manager to treasure chest, then we will set the UI to active. Now let's create a few functions for the animation. We will need a static function for the treasure chest to send the rewards item sprite to the manager. It will then save it under the variable icons. Now create a new function called flashWhite. This function will be responsible for flashing the panel when the fireworks occur. Next, we will create a coroutine called activate curved beams, which will allow us to set the delay of which the curved beams will spawn. Then, we will have another coroutine called handleCoinDisplay. This function will do the rolling animation for the coins until it hits its target. It will then activate the done button after the coin stops rolling. Next, we will create a function called setUpBeam, which this function will do is it will activate the corresponding beams and assign the reward sprite to the item display. We will then need a coroutine for the showDelayedBeam, where we set a delay before we start looping through and activating the beams using setUpBeam. Create a function called displayerBeam. This function will be responsible for displaying the right amount of beams. We'll start off by separating the beams from the delayed ones, display all the non-delayed beams. Then, after the delay, we will start the coroutine showDelayedBeams to display the rest of the beam. Finally, we will just start the coroutine to display the items. Create another coroutine for displaying the item. We will have a for loop to activate the items one by one. Optionally, we can also add this section for the 5 items reward, where it will display the items in a more unique way. We will set up the function open. This is where most of our VFX will be handled. First, we will check if fireworks are turned on. If it is, we will set the animation to false. Then, we will set the fireworks to active and then set a delay before all the other VFX gets played. Afterwards, we will set its animation back to true and check if curved beams are set to true. If it is, we will start the coroutine active curved beam. After that, we will enable all effects that we will need, like the coins rolling, the beams, and all necessary VFX. And after that, we will make sure to turn off all the VFX after the animation duration is up. Now, we need a way for the open button to be able to interact with the script. So we're going to create a function called begin that can be hooked up to the open button. And this function, what we'll do is first remove the chest cover, and then we will set the open button to inactive. Then we will call the coroutine open. We will then start playing the sound effects from the drop profile. Now, let's work on being able to skip the rewards. Create a function called skip the rewards. What we'll do is stop all coroutines that are occurring. We will then immediately show all the beams. We then instantly set the coin value. Then we skip to the last second of the audio. Moving on to the update function, we will check if the skip button has been pressed. If it has, it will call the skip the reward function. Additionally, we will also make the open and done button interactable using the enter key. Finally, we will create 2 functions called close and reset display, which will reset everything and prepare it for its next use. Head back to the editor and look for the player game object. After that, we will open the player inventory script. We will be introducing new generics to the script to enable flexible type-safe handling of item storage, retrieval, upgrades, and evolution. The system will need to keep track of what items the player owns and what are available. The first generic we'll add retrieves all inventory slots of a specific item type, though that this is for the class item. We will also need another function that will do the same but for the class item data. The reason why we separate these 2 functions is because item represents the actual in-game object, while item data represents the scriptable object of that item. Keeping them separate will also help maintain code readability and help enforce type safety as they both operate in different types. We will create a function called getSlotsLeft, which will check through each slot in the inventory one by one. If it is empty, it will increment the counter by 1 till they finish looking through the inventory. It will return the final count, which is the amount of empty slots left. Then, we will create 2 functions that build off of our last function, which will allow us to easily retrieve the number of empty slots for both items and item data. Then, we have a function to retrieve all available weapons or passive the player can receive, no matter if the player owns it or not. With this function, we are able to make a new generic that can help us make a new list of the player items. Create a new generic and call it getUnowned. We will first get all the available type. We will then create a new list and add all available items to that list. We will then do a for loop to check the slots one by one, and if there is an item already existing in that slot, we will remove that item from the list, thus only leaving a list of items the player does not own. Finally, we will have a function that will check through the slots for items that meet the requirements to evolve and compile them into a list. Similarly, we will also have a function for upgrading the items. We can now start with the actual treasure chest. Go to the folder and create a new script and call it TreasureChest. Open the script and let's start with the variables. Let's add an enum class called DropType with all different drops the chest can provide. This is just to add more customization to our chest by allowing us to adjust what kind of rewards the chest can reward. Next, we'll have an enum for choosing sequential or random. This will let us customize how the different routes will be chosen. Add a static variable so we can keep track of the sequence. Next, we'll have a list of treasure chest profile. We'll then add a variable to store the drop profile pick. Finally, a reference to the player inventory. Let's start with how the chest will pick out the rewards. Create a function called getCurrentDropProfile, which will simply return what the current chest pick is. Next, we'll have a function getNextDropProfile. This will be how the chest will be picked. We have two ways the chest can use to pick the rewards, which is sequential and random. Since we are using an enum class, let's use a switch statement. Let's start with the case of sequential. The chest will pick the first drop profile in the list, then later increase the counter by 1. This is so that the next chest that is open, the second drop profile in the list will be the one picked. Now, for the case of randomness, first we will get the luck set of the player. We will then make a list of the drop profiles in the profile. After that, we will use the formula to calculate the weight of each profile and add them all together. We store each drop profile with its weight. Using weights means that we don't need everything to add up to 100%. Instead, we just add all weights together, roll a random number in total, and see which profile slice we land in. We will sort this list in ascending order to ensure fairness. We will sum all the weights, then roll a random number between 0 and the total weight. We will check where the weight has landed and pick the drop profile accordingly. The next function will be to get the rewards. Create a function and call it getRewardCount. We will then get the number of items from the drop profile we picked. Now, we will need functions for giving out the rewards. The first function we will make will be for evolving the weapons. We first loop through all evolvable items. Then, we will try to evolve each weapon until one is successful. We then give the UI treasure chest the icon of the evolved item. Next, we will do the same for upgrading weapon rewards. Create a function and call it tryUpgrade. We will then loop through all items that can level up and store them in a list. We then randomly pick an item from that list to level up. We then give the UI treasure chest the icon of the upgraded item. Finally, we will do the same for giving of items. We'll create a function called open. Inside this function, we'll go through a list of possible actions the chest can take, like evolving a weapon, upgrading a weapon, or giving the player a new item. Each of these actions is written as a line, and we check them one by one from top to bottom. If one of them returns, the rest will be executed. That's why we use return after each one. This system allows us to prioritize drops, like always trying to evolve items first, and only giving a new item if no upgrades are possible. Of course, you can rearrange and or alter this section to your liking. Now, to check if the player pick up the chest, we will use an on-trigger enter 2D. We will first find out how many items should be given out using getRewardCount. Then, we will call the open function the same amount of time as the reward count. After giving the rewards, we will set the chest inactive. We will send information to the UI treasure chest. Finally, we will increment the total pickup for the sequence. Now we're gonna make a treasure chest prefab. Create an empty game object and name it treasure chest. Then, in the inspector, let's add a sprite renderer. Assign a treasure chest sprite to the sprite and set the sorting layer to foreground. Then, we will add a collider. Let's add a block collider 2D and make sure there is trigger. Afterwards, let's add our script treasure chest. Then, in the treasure chest variables, let's assign our drop profiles. After that is done, let's set drop count to random. Now our treasure chest prefab is ready. Simply go to the folder again. Let's go to our prefab folder and add in our treasure chest. Now our treasure chest is a prefab. We can play and test out. Lastly, there's a few things left to amend for the UI treasure chest. So we're gonna go to each weapon view. even in the delay views, so the amount of views, and set all of it to unskilled type. Then, in the victory view and the delay views in the animator, let's set the update mode to unskilled type. After that is done, let's ensure that beam mask is active. This is active. The beams are all inactive. Then keep weapon build active. Then item parent inactive. Now repeat that for the rest of the beams. After that, we can go to our treasure chest manager, and let's add our UI treasure chest. And let's add the audio source too. Now that we have everything, we can start assigning our variables to the UI treasure chest. After that is done, let's go to our open button, and we're gonna assign an on click. We'll assign a UI treasure chest, and let's set this to begin. And for the done button, we will do the same, and this time we will assign the close UI. And after that is all done, we can click play and test it out.